The year was 2147, and humanity had finally unlocked the mysteries of faster-than-light travel. For the first time in its history, Earth was no longer alone. The stars were alive with civilizations, and among them was the Aelari, a graceful, highly intelligent species whose silver skin shimmered under their twin suns. They had noticed humanity's arrival in the galaxy and extended an invitation for a formal meeting. Dr. Elena Ramirez, one of Earth's leading xenobiologists, was chosen to lead the delegation. She was calm under pressure, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. As she stood aboard the interstellar space station named Harmonic Nexus, she couldn't help but marvel at the architecture. The walls glowed faintly, and the air smelled faintly of something floral yet metallic. "Dr. Ramirez, they're ready to meet us," said Commander Malik, a tall, broad-shouldered man who acted as security for the team. His voice was steady, but even he couldn't hide his curiosity. They had all studied the Aelari in preparation, but seeing them face to face was different. Elena nodded and led the human delegation into the meeting chamber. It was vast, with translucent walls that revealed a spectacular view of a nebula swirling outside. A group of Aelari stood waiting, their delicate features and flowing robes making them look almost ethereal. Their leader, a serene figure named Kellis, greeted them in fluent English. "Welcome, travelers from Earth," Kellis said, his voice melodic. "We are honored by your presence and eager to learn about your people." "And we are honored by your invitation," Elena replied, her tone formal but warm. The introductions went smoothly, and soon both sides were seated around a circular table designed to symbolize equality. The conversation began with exchanges about technology and culture. The Aelari were fascinated by human art, particularly music, which they claimed had no equivalent in their own culture. Humans, in turn, were intrigued by the Aelari's ability to communicate emotions through subtle changes in the colors of their skin. The mood in the room was optimistic, and Elena felt they were off to a good start. Then, the unexpected happened. One of the younger Aelari, a curious female named Leora, raised her hand. Her silver skin shimmered faintly as she spoke. "Excuse me, Dr. Ramirez," she began hesitantly, "but there is something we have heard about your species that fascinates us greatly." Elena smiled, nodding for her to continue. "Of course, Leora. What is it?" Leora exchanged glances with her companions, who seemed equally eager yet hesitant. Finally, she asked, "Could you show us what's between your legs?" The room fell silent. Elena blinked, unsure if she had misheard. Commander Malik coughed, trying to hide his shock, while the other human delegates exchanged confused and awkward glances. For a moment, no one knew how to respond. Kellis, the Aelari leader, noticed the tension and quickly spoke up. "Please forgive Leora," he said, his tone apologetic yet kind. "Our species has a tradition of understanding biological differences through direct observation. It is a rite of passage for young learners like her." Elena composed herself, her mind racing. This was clearly a cultural misunderstanding, not an act of disrespect. "I see," she said carefully. "In our culture, such a request might be considered too personal, but I understand your intention is academic." "Yes, exactly," Leora said, her silver eyes brightening. "We mean no offense. We simply wish to understand how your kind reproduces. We have heard that it is unique compared to other species." Elena glanced at her team. Commander Malik raised an eyebrow as if to say, "Good luck with this one." She turned back to Leora, choosing her words with care. "We humans value privacy when it comes to such matters. But I promise we can find a way to share information that satisfies your curiosity without crossing boundaries." Leora tilted her head, clearly pondering Elena's response. "That would be acceptable. We are eager to learn in any way you deem appropriate." The conversation moved on, but the tension lingered in the air. As the meeting ended, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a much larger challenge. The Aelari were not like any species humanity had encountered before. They were inquisitive, deeply curious, and unafraid to ask questions that others might avoid. As she walked back to the human quarters on the station, Alina felt both nervous and intrigued. This mission was about more than diplomacy. It was about understanding on both sides, and she had the distinct feeling that humanity's ability to navigate these cultural differences would shape its place in the galaxy for years to come. Alina sat in the quiet conference room assigned to The year was 2147, and humanity had finally unlocked the mysteries of faster-than-light travel. For the first time in its history, Earth was no longer alone. The stars were alive with civilizations, and among them was the Aelari, a graceful, highly intelligent species whose silver skin shimmered under their twin suns. They had noticed humanity's arrival in the galaxy and extended an invitation for a formal meeting. Dr. Elena Ramirez, one of Earth's leading xenobiologists, was chosen to lead the delegation. She was calm under pressure, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. As she stood aboard the interstellar space station named Harmonic Nexus, she couldn't help but marvel at the architecture. The walls glowed faintly, and the air smelled faintly of something floral yet metallic. "Dr. Ramirez, they're ready to meet us," said Commander Malik, a tall, broad-shouldered man who acted as security for the team. His voice was steady, but even he couldn't hide his curiosity. They had all studied the Aelari in preparation, but seeing them face to face was different. Elena nodded and led the human delegation into the meeting chamber. It was vast, with translucent walls that revealed a spectacular view of a nebula swirling outside. A group of Aelari stood waiting, their delicate features and flowing robes making them look almost ethereal. Their leader, a serene figure named Kellis, greeted them in fluent English. "Welcome, travelers from Earth," Kellis said, his voice melodic. "We are honored by your presence and eager to learn about your people. And we are honored by your invitation," Elena replied, her tone formal but warm. The introductions went smoothly, and soon both sides were seated around a circular table designed to symbolize equality. The conversation began with exchanges about technology and culture. The Aelari were fascinated by human art, particularly music, which they claimed had no equivalent in their own culture. Humans, in turn, were intrigued by the Aelari's ability to communicate emotions through subtle changes in the colors of their skin. The mood in the room was optimistic, and Elena felt they were off to a good start. Then, the unexpected happened. One of the younger Aelari, a curious female named Leora, raised her hand. Her silver skin shimmered faintly as she spoke. "Excuse me, Dr. Ramirez," she began hesitantly, "but there is something we have heard about your species that fascinates us greatly." Elena smiled, nodding for her to continue. "Of course, Leora. What is it?" Leora exchanged glances with her companions, who seemed equally eager yet hesitant. Finally, she asked, "Could you show us what's between your legs?" The room fell silent. Elena blinked, unsure if she had misheard. Commander Malik coughed, trying to hide his shock, while the other human delegates exchanged confused and awkward glances. For a moment, no one knew how to respond. Kellis, the Aelari leader, noticed the tension and quickly spoke up. "Please forgive Leora," he said, his tone apologetic yet kind. "Our species has a tradition of understanding biological differences through direct observation. It is a rite of passage for young learners like her." Elena composed herself, her mind racing. This was clearly a cultural misunderstanding, not an act of disrespect. "I see," she said carefully. "In our culture, such a request might be considered too personal, but I understand your intention is academic." "Yes, exactly," Leora said, her silver eyes brightening. "We mean no offense. We simply wish to understand how your kind reproduces. We have heard that it is unique compared to other species." Elena glanced at her team. Commander Malik raised an eyebrow as if to say, "Good luck with this one." She turned back to Leora, choosing her words with care. "We humans value privacy when it comes to such matters. But I promise we can find a way to share information that satisfies your curiosity without crossing boundaries." Leora tilted her head, clearly pondering Elena's response. That would be acceptable. We are eager to learn in any way you deem appropriate. The conversation moved on, but the tension lingered in the air. As the meeting ended, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a much larger challenge. The Aelari were not like any species humanity had encountered before. They were inquisitive, deeply curious, and unafraid to ask questions that others might avoid. As she walked back to the human quarters on the station, Elena felt both nervous and intrigued. This mission was about more than diplomacy. It was about understanding on both sides, and she had the distinct feeling that humanity's ability to navigate these cultural differences would shape its place in the galaxy for years to come. Elena sat in the quiet conference room assigned to the. As the session ended, Elena felt a sense of accomplishment. The Aelari had begun to understand not just how humans reproduced, but why it mattered to them. And for the first time, she felt that this strange request might lead to something greater. A true partnership built on respect and understanding. But deep down, she also knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and humanity's journey among the stars was just starting. There would be more challenges, more misunderstandings, and more opportunities to show what made humans truly extraordinary. The space station buzzed with quiet energy as both humans and Aelari worked to deepen their understanding of one another. Elena walked briskly down the illuminated corridors toward the Aelari quarters, her mind racing. The earlier sessions had gone surprisingly well. Yet she knew that true progress required more than just presentations and models. Trust needed to be built brick by brick. When Elena entered the Aelari cultural chamber, she found Leora waiting for her, surrounded by a group of other young Aelari. Their silver skin glowed faintly, a sign of excitement. The room itself was a marvel. Soft, pulsing lights decorated the ceiling, mimicking the stars outside, and the walls were lined with floating orbs displaying images of Aelari history and traditions. Dr. Ramirez, Leora greeted, her voice warm and melodic. Thank you for coming. We are eager to learn more today. I'm glad to be here, Elena replied with a smile. But I was hoping we could try something a little different. The Aelari tilted their heads in unison, a sign of curiosity. I'd like to learn about your culture too, Elena continued. I shared a lot about humanity, but understanding goes both ways. Would you show me something important to your people? Leora's silver eyes widened, and her skin shimmered a pale blue, a shade Elena had come to recognize as joy. Of course, there is much we can share. Would you like to see how we express unity? Elena nodded, intrigued. The Aelari led her to an open area in the center of their quarters, where a circular platform floated slightly above the floor. It was surrounded by crystalline instruments that vibrated faintly, emitting harmonious tones. This is the sphere of resonance, Leora explained. It is how we connect with one another. By standing here, we synchronize our energy and share our emotions without words. Elena hesitated. It sounds intimate. It is, Leora admitted. But it is also safe. You do not have to share anything you do not wish to. Simply stand with us, and the sphere will do the rest. Taking a deep breath, Elena stepped onto the platform alongside Leora and two other Aelari. The moment her foot touched the glowing surface, she felt a gentle hum pass through her body. It wasn't unpleasant, more like a soft vibration that made her feel weightless. The Aelari began to emit faint, melodic sounds, harmonizing with the vibrations of the sphere. Elena didn't understand the mechanism behind it, but she felt a warmth spreading through her chest. It was as if the sphere translated emotions into something tangible. At first, she sensed curiosity and wonder, the Aelari's feelings as they interacted with her. Then, deeper emotions began to surface. Leora's eagerness to connect, a hint of nervousness from one of the others, and an overwhelming sense of unity from the group as a whole. It's beautiful, Elena said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Leora smiled. And now, we can feel your emotions too. You are curious, but also cautious. You care deeply about understanding us. Alina blinked. The sphere wasn't just a tool for connection. It was a mirror reflecting her own feelings back to her. When the session ended, Alina stepped off the platform, feeling strangely light. She looked at Lyora, who seemed more vibrant than ever. "Thank you for sharing this," Alina said. "I can see now why this is so important to your people. It's a way of building trust that words can't always achieve." Lyora's silver skin shimmered warmly. "And you have shown us something equally important, how to build trust through respect and choice. We are learning from you, Dr. Ramirez, just as you are learning from us." Later that day, Alina returned to the human quarters to share her experience with the team. Commander Malik leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "So let me get this straight. You stood on a glowing platform, hummed a little, and now you're best friends with the aliens." Alina smirked. "It's more than that, Malik. The Aelari have a unique way of connecting that's deeply emotional. It's not something we can replicate, but it shows how important trust and understanding are to them." Sarah, the cultural liaison, chimed in. "It sounds like they're as invested in this relationship as we are." "That's a good sign." "It is," Alina agreed. "But it also means we need to tread carefully. Their openness is a strength, but it makes them vulnerable too. If we're not careful, we could damage this relationship before it even begins." As the station's artificial day turned to night, Alina found herself staring out at the vast expanse of stars. The galaxy was enormous, filled with countless unknowns. But in this small corner, humanity had found something precious, a chance to build something extraordinary with the Aelari. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that challenges still lay ahead. Trust was fragile, and misunderstandings were inevitable. But if the last few days had taught her anything, it was that humanity's greatest strength wasn't its technology or its ambition. It was its ability to connect, even across the vast distances of space. For now, that was enough. The following morning, the human delegation gathered in their quarters, reviewing plans for another session with the Aelari. Alina was preparing a presentation on human storytelling, a topic the Aelari had expressed great interest in. She hoped it would build on the growing trust between their species. However, just as she was about to leave, an alert sounded from her communication pad. Commander Malik glanced at his own device, his brow furrowing. "Dr. Ramirez," he said, his tone tense, "we've got an issue. Aelari Security has requested a meeting. Something happened last night." Alina's stomach tightened. "What kind of something?" "They didn't say," Malik replied, "but they seemed upset." When Alina and Malik arrived at the Aelari Security Center, Kalis and several other Aelari leaders were waiting. Their normally shimmering silver skin was dull, reflecting unease. Lyora was there too, standing quietly in the corner. "Kalis," Alina greeted, her voice calm. "You asked to see us. What's happened?" Kalis gestured toward a holographic projection in the center of the room. It displayed a surveillance feed from the station's docking bay. The footage showed a group of human engineers unloading cargo when one of them, a man named Carter, opened a sealed container and pulled out a strange object. It looked like a piece of Aelari technology, sleek and glowing faintly. "Is this a mistake?" Kalis asked, his voice steady but tinged with concern. "Why is your team handling our technology without permission?" Alina's eyes widened. "I don't know," she said quickly. "This wasn't authorized. That cargo should have been left untouched." Malik stepped forward, his jaw tight. "Carter isn't part of our core team. He's one of the support crew. I'll handle this personally." Kalis inclined his head, though his expression remained tense. "Please do. This technology is sacred to us. It is not merely a tool. It holds cultural and spiritual significance. Unauthorized handling is deeply disrespectful." Alina felt a pang of guilt. Humanity's eagerness to explore and adapt often led to missteps. "Kalis," she said, her voice earnest, "we deeply regret this incident. I assure you, it wasn't intentional." Kalis gave a slow nod. "I believe you, Dr. Ramirez. But some of my people are not so certain. They fear this could be the beginning of exploitation. Back in the human quarters, Elena confronted Carter. The young engineer looked sheepish as Malik loomed over him, arms crossed. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Malik barked. That wasn't just a piece of tech, it was part of their cultural heritage. "I didn't know," Carter stammered. "It looked like a power source. I thought it might be useful for our research." Elena pinched the bridge of her nose, frustration building. "This isn't about usefulness, Carter. It's about respect. We're guests here, and we can't afford to make mistakes like this." "I'm sorry," Carter said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." Elena sighed. "You'll stay confined to quarters for now. Malik, make sure the Alari know we've addressed this." The incident cast a shadow over the day's planned session. When Elena met with the Alari delegation, the atmosphere was noticeably colder. Kalis remained polite, but there was a stiffness to his posture. Lyora, who had been so open and enthusiastic before, seemed withdrawn. Elena decided to address the issue head-on. "Before we continue, I want to apologize again for what happened," she said, her voice steady. "It was a mistake, and the individual responsible has been reprimanded. We value your trust, and will work to earn it back." Kalis regarded her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Your words are appreciated, Dr. Ramirez, but trust, once shaken, takes time to rebuild." Later that evening, Elena found herself in the observation deck, staring out at the endless expanse of stars. She couldn't shake the feeling of failure. The Alari had been so open, so willing to share, and now that openness was beginning to close. Lyora's soft voice broke the silence. "You seem troubled." Elena turned to find the young Alari standing nearby, her silver skin glowing faintly. "I am," Elena admitted. "I feel like we've ruined everything." Lyora stepped closer, her gaze steady. "It is not ruined, Dr. Ramirez, but this has shown us that even with the best intentions, misunderstandings can happen. What matters is how we move forward." Elena nodded, taking comfort in Lyora's words. "We want to make this right. What can we do?" Lyora hesitated, then said, "Perhaps show us something meaningful to you. Something that proves your sincerity." Elena considered this. The Alari had shared their sphere of resonance, an intimate and sacred part of their culture. Maybe it was time for humanity to share something equally important. The next day, Elena proposed an idea to the team. They would invite the Alari to witness a human ritual, something deeply symbolic and universally understood. "What did you have in mind?" Malik asked, skeptical. "A storytelling session," Elena replied. "Humans have always used stories to connect, to teach, and to heal. It's one of the most powerful ways we express who we are." Malik raised an eyebrow, but eventually nodded. "Let's hope it works." As Elena prepared for the session, she felt a spark of hope. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but humanity's strength lay in its ability to adapt and connect. If they could show the Alari the heart of their culture, maybe, just maybe, they could begin to rebuild what had been broken. The following evening, the human delegation transformed one of the space station's larger chambers into a makeshift amphitheater. Rows of soft cushions replaced chairs, and dim lighting created an intimate atmosphere. A central platform, illuminated by a soft, golden glow, served as the stage. The Alari delegation, led by Kalis and Lyora, arrived quietly, their silver skin reflecting faint hints of curiosity. Elena stood near the entrance, welcoming the Alari as they entered. She noticed the way their eyes swept across the room, their expressions neutral but attentive. They were still wary, but they had come, and that was a start. Lyora approached Elena, her voice gentle. "This is your way of sharing something meaningful." Elena nodded. Storytelling is one of humanity's oldest traditions. Through stories, we pass down knowledge, share emotions, and connect with one another. Tonight, we want to show you how we see the world, not through technology or data, but through our hearts. Once everyone was seated, Alina stepped onto the platform, her nerves humming. She glanced at Commander Malik, who gave her an encouraging nod from the corner of the room. Taking a deep breath, she began. In human history, stories have always been more than just entertainment. They are windows into who we are, what we value, and how we see the universe. Tonight, I'll share one of our most cherished tales, a story of courage, unity, and the strength of the human spirit. The room fell silent as Alina began to recount an ancient tale of Earth, one passed down through generations. It was the story of a small village threatened by a mighty storm. The villagers, though diverse in their backgrounds and beliefs, came together to protect their home. Each person contributed their unique skills. Builders reinforced the homes, farmers shared their crops, and musicians played songs to keep spirits high. As the storm raged, the village stood strong, united by their shared purpose. In the end, the storm passed, leaving the village intact and its people closer than ever. Alina's voice carried the emotions of the story, fear, hope, and triumph, and the Ilari listened intently, their shimmering skin reflecting shades of deep thought. When Alina finished, there was a moment of stillness. Then Leora spoke, her voice soft but filled with wonder. Your story, it is simple, yet profound. It shows the strength of unity, even in the face of great challenges. Kalis nodded, his expression contemplative. It is a reflection of your people's resilience. You value cooperation, even when differences exist. Alina smiled. Exactly. And it's not just a story. It's a lesson we carry with us, even now. No matter how vast the universe, no matter how different we may seem, we believe we are stronger together. The Ilari exchanged glances, their skin flickering with subtle shades of understanding. Leora leaned forward slightly, her silver eyes fixed on Alina. Your story reminds me of something from our own history. May I share it? Alina nodded eagerly. Please, we'd be honored. Leora stepped onto the platform and began to weave an Ilari tale. It was a story of their ancestors, who once lived scattered across different star systems. For generations, they lived in isolation, each group believing their way of life was the only correct one. But as their worlds began to fail, they realized they could not survive alone. Slowly, they reached out to one another, sharing knowledge, resources, and traditions. Together, they built the Ilari we see today, a unified civilization, stronger for its diversity. The Ilari's melodic voices added depth to the tale, creating an almost hypnotic rhythm that captivated the audience. When Leora finished, the room was silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Alina rose from her seat, her heart full. Your story mirrors our own in so many ways. It shows that despite our differences, we all face the same challenges, and we can overcome them together. Kalis stood, his silvery form glowing faintly. Dr. Ramirez, tonight you have shown us a side of humanity that we had not fully understood. Your stories, like ours, carry the essence of who you are. They reveal your capacity for unity, for resilience, and for hope. The room filled with a quiet warmth, an unspoken connection forming between the humans and the Ilari. For the first time since the incident, Alina felt a sense of healing. As the evening ended, Alina walked Leora back to the Ilari quarters. Thank you for sharing your story, she said. It meant a lot to us. Leora smiled, her skin shimmering softly. And thank you for yours. Tonight, I felt something rare, a bridge forming between our worlds. Perhaps this is the beginning of something truly extraordinary. Alina nodded, a sense of hope looming within her. The challenges weren't over, but tonight had proven one thing. No matter how vast the galaxy, stories could bring people together. And in those shared moments, anything felt possible. Days passed, and the mood aboard the station lightened. Alina and the Ilari had begun to rebuild their fragile bond. Their shared stories had created a connection, and for the first time, Alina believed the peace between their species could be more than just a hopeful dream. However, something was still unsettled. Beneath the surface of their growing camaraderie, there were signs that not everyone was as ready to trust as Leora and Callus seemed to be. One afternoon, as Alina walked through the corridors of the station, she overheard snippets of conversation between two Aelari security officers. They were speaking in hushed tones, but their words were clear enough. "This alliance, it is not as strong as it seems," one of them said, his voice filled with uncertainty. "We cannot ignore the history of their people. The humans may be well-meaning," the other responded, "but can we afford to place all our trust in them so quickly?" Alina's heart sank. She had known the road to true unity would be long, but hearing this doubt voiced so openly made her wonder just how deeply the fears of exploitation and mistrust ran. Were the Aelari truly as open as they seemed? Or was this trust one-sided, with the humans unaware of the underlying tensions? Later that day, Alina met with Callus and Leora for their usual session. As she entered the Aelari chamber, she noticed the quiet, the subtle shifts in their behavior. Callus was the first to speak. "Dr. Ramirez," Callus began, his tone steady but carefully measured, "we have been discussing the nature of our relationship, and while we have learned much, there are concerns within our people." Alina frowned, her mind racing. Concerns about what? Leora looked at Alina, her silver skin shifting from a soft blue to a deep green, a sign of distress. "We are not so different, you and I," Leora said. "But our people are. There are those who are afraid of being changed by you, of being influenced by your culture. We have long held on to the ways of our ancestors, and the idea of change, of becoming like others, is not something we take lightly." Alina's heart sank. She had feared this. The Aelari, despite their outward openness, were struggling with the idea of cultural assimilation, of being too closely tied to humanity's ways. "We never wanted to change your culture," Alina said, her voice firm. "We've always respected your traditions, but we must also share and learn from one another, or this alliance will never grow." Callus's eyes narrowed slightly. "It is not about respect, Dr. Ramirez. It is about control. Humans have a tendency to dominate, to take over. There are factions among us who believe that we must be cautious in how we proceed." Leora stood, moving closer to Alina. "Some believe that once you are too close to us, you will take what is ours, not just our technology, but our very identity. And once you take it, you will change it, just as you did to your own world." Alina stood frozen, the weight of Callus's words pressing down on her. She had understood the importance of trust, but she hadn't fully realized the depth of the fear the Aelari carried. It wasn't just about technology or resources. It was about their culture, their very way of life. "I understand," Alina said slowly, choosing her words carefully. "I had no idea you felt this way. We've never meant to impose on your people, Callus. But we're learning. We're here to grow together, not take from you." Callus's expression softened slightly, but his gaze remained sharp. "Perhaps, but there is a greater risk now. The situation is delicate." Leora added, "We will need to meet again soon, in a more public setting, with our council. The people need to know that we are making this decision together. They will not follow if they feel they are being led down a path they do not wish to walk." As Alina left the meeting, her mind was clouded with doubt. She had thought the hardest part was building trust, but this new challenge, this fear of cultural erosion, was more difficult to overcome than she had imagined. How could she assure the Aelari that humanity would never seek to erase their identity? That evening, she stood by the observation deck, looking out at the endless stars. The future seemed so uncertain. The humans had come so far in understanding the Aelari, yet it felt like they were at the edge of a precipice. Any misstep, any misunderstanding, could destroy everything they had worked so hard to build. Meanwhile, Leora and Callus met with the Aelari Council, gathering to discuss the growing tension. The debate was heated, with strong opinions on both sides. Some argued that the alliance with humanity could lead to a new era of prosperity, while others feared the potential loss of their way of life. "We must not let them change us," one council member said, her voice trembling with emotion. "The humans will take our culture, our traditions, and they will make them their own. We cannot let that happen." "But they have shown us their goodwill," another argued. "Their stories, their sharing. It is not an attempt to conquer us, but to understand. We have nothing to fear if we choose this path together." Leora listened quietly, torn between the voices of fear and hope. She knew that both sides had valid points. The Aelari had always been careful, protective of their traditions. But she also saw the potential for something new, something beautiful, in the relationship between their two peoples. As the council meeting stretched into the night, Alina and the human team prepared for the next phase of their mission. They would have to find a way to address the Aelari's fears and reassure them that their culture, their identity, would always be respected. But it was clear that the journey ahead would not be as simple as they had once hoped. The seeds of doubt had been planted, and now it was up to humanity to prove they could overcome them, or risk losing everything they had worked so hard to build. The following days aboard the station were filled with tension. Alina could feel the weight of the uncertainty hanging in the air. The Aelari were not the same as they had been before the council meeting. Their warm smiles had faded, replaced by reserved expressions and cautious gestures. It seemed the seeds of fear planted by a few had spread, and now the entire Aelari population was questioning the alliance. Alina couldn't shake the feeling that everything they had worked for was on the verge of collapse. The fragile trust between humanity and the Aelari had been tested, and now it was up to her to rebuild it. She was no longer just a scientist trying to learn from another species. She was a symbol of her people's intentions, and if she failed, it would be the humans who lost everything. One afternoon, she stood at the observation deck, staring at the stars. Her mind was heavy with the realization that the future of the mission was at stake. The Aelari had welcomed them, shared their culture, and even opened up their most sacred places to humanity. But now, that trust was crumbling beneath them. She had to find a way to fix it, to show the Aelari that humanity was not a threat to their way of life. "Dr. Ramirez," a voice interrupted her thoughts. Alina turned to find Leora standing behind her, her silver skin glowing faintly. Leora's eyes were filled with a mix of sadness and determination. "I need to speak with you," Leora said quietly. Alina nodded, her heart skipping a beat. She had been dreading this conversation. "Of course, Leora. What's on your mind?" Leora hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I believe there is still a chance to save this alliance, but it will require more than just words. The Council, they are not convinced. They see your people as a potential danger to our culture. If we cannot show them that this relationship will be balanced, that we will not lose ourselves in it, then we will not survive." Alina's heart tightened. She had known that the Aelari were hesitant, but hearing it spoken so plainly was a hard blow. "I understand," she said quietly. "But how can we prove that we mean no harm? How can we show that we're not trying to change you?" Leora looked down, her silver skin shimmering with emotion. "Perhaps you cannot. Perhaps it is not your words that will convince them. It is your actions. You must show us, not just with stories, but with deeds." Alina considered this. She knew that the Aelari were a proud people, and their connection to their traditions was deep. Words alone would never be enough to convince them. It would take something more, something tangible, something that proved humanity's commitment to respecting their way of life. "I'll do whatever it takes," Alina said, her voice steady. "I will show them that we are not a threat." The next day, Alina called a meeting with the human delegation. They needed a plan, and they needed it fast. Commander Malik was the first to speak. "We can't let this slip through our fingers. If the Aelari pull back, the entire mission could fall apart." "I know," Alina replied. "But we've reached a critical point. Words alone won't solve this. We need to show them that we respect their culture. No, that we honor it." Malik frowned. How do we do that? We can't just erase centuries of distrust with a few gestures. No, Elena agreed. But we can make a meaningful gesture, something that proves we're committed to learning from them, not changing them. She paused. Then an idea sparked. What if we offer something of our own, something deeply meaningful, just as they shared their history with us? What if we show them a part of human culture that we hold dear, a tradition that represents everything we stand for? The room fell silent as the team processed her words. Finally, Lieutenant Harris spoke up. You mean like a ritual? A human ceremony? Exactly, Elena said, her voice rising with excitement. But not just any ceremony. It has to be something that symbolizes unity, respect, and shared purpose. It has to be something they can see as meaningful, not just a performance. The team discussed several ideas, but it was clear that they were all in agreement. The humans needed to offer the Aelari a part of themselves, something that would speak to their core values. Elena's mind raced as she thought about which human tradition would be best to share with the Aelari. After a few moments, she made a decision. I have an idea, she said. It's a ceremony we use on Earth to bring people together, to show that no matter where we come from, we are all connected. It's called the Unity Feast. It's a celebration of cooperation, where people come together to share food and stories, to connect in a way that transcends everything else. The team nodded, and the plan was set into motion. They would prepare for the Unity Feast, a ceremony that would show the Aelari that humanity valued cooperation, mutual respect, and the power of coming together. Later that evening, Elena stood before the human team, her heart pounding. The Aelari had agreed to attend the ceremony, but there was no guarantee it would be enough to repair the damage. Still, she had no choice but to try. She could only hope that the Aelari would see the sincerity in their efforts, and that this gesture would prove humanity's commitment to understanding them, not changing them. As the Aelari delegation entered the room, Elena met their eyes with a steady gaze. This was the moment of truth. Would the Unity Feast be enough to bridge the gap between their species? The room was filled with anticipation, and Elena could feel the weight of the moment, the fate of the Alliance, and the future of humanity's relationship with the Aelari rested on this one gesture. The Unity Feast was prepared with great care. Elena and her team worked through the night, arranging the food, decorations, and ceremonial symbols. It was a human tradition, a celebration that had been shared by families, communities, and nations for centuries. They had hoped it would show the Aelari the depth of humanity's respect for unity. Now, all they could do was wait. The room was filled with a mix of human and Aelari delegates, standing apart but watching each other with a mix of curiosity and caution. The humans had set up long tables, covered with an array of foods from both cultures. Some dishes were familiar to the humans: roasted meats, fruits, and breads. Others were uniquely Aelari, vibrant, and unlike anything the humans had ever seen. The room was lit by soft, golden lights, and there was a warmth in the air that contrasted the tense atmosphere. Elena stood at the center of the room, feeling the weight of every gaze upon her. She knew this was more than just a feast, it was a test. Would this ceremony be enough to heal the rift between the two species? Could they truly convince the Aelari that humanity was not a threat, but a partner? Lyra and Kalis entered first, their expressions reserved. They were followed by the rest of the Aelari delegation, each of them moving with the same graceful but cautious steps. As they took their seats, Elena offered a respectful bow, which Lyra returned with a nod. The room fell silent as the ceremony began. Elena stepped forward, her voice steady but carrying the weight of the moment. Welcome, friends. Tonight, we share not just food, but a piece of our hearts. The Unity Feast is a symbol of our commitment to each other, a reminder that despite our differences, we are all part of something greater. She gestured to the tables before them. Let us begin by sharing not just what we eat, but who we are. In this ceremony, we honor the bonds that unite us, not just as species, but as beings who seek to understand and grow together. The humans had prepared their dishes with care, but now, They were also sharing something deeper: stories. One by one, members of the human delegation stood, offering tales of unity, perseverance, and hope. Stories from Earth's past, of how humans had come together in times of crisis, how they had worked with others to overcome the challenges that threatened their world. Lyra listened intently, her eyes flickering with emotion. She had heard of Earth's history before, but hearing it spoken aloud, so personal, so raw, was different. There was power in these stories, power in the shared experiences of these people. As the last human finished their tale, Lyra stood. "I have heard your stories," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of her thoughts. "And I understand now. Your hearts are filled with a desire for unity, just as ours are. But there is something we have feared: the loss of ourselves, the loss of our culture." Elena stepped forward, her gaze meeting Lyra's. "We would never ask you to give that up," she said earnestly. "We only want to walk beside you. We are not here to change you. We are here to learn from you, to share in what makes us all stronger. We may be different, but that's what makes this partnership meaningful." Lyra's silver skin shimmered, reflecting the soft lights around them. She looked at Kellis, who gave a small nod. Slowly, Lyra turned back to Elena, her expression softening. "There are things about your people that we do not yet understand," Lyra said. "Things we fear, but your words, your actions tonight, they have shown us that we do not need to fear you, not if we take this journey together." The room held its breath as Lyra spoke again. "I cannot speak for all of my people, but I believe that we may have found a way forward. Not just in partnership, but in understanding, in unity." There was a pause, then Callis stood. His silver eyes locked on Elena's, and for the first time, she saw something like hope in his gaze. "Your offering tonight, Dr. Ramirez, it is a gesture of true respect," Callis said, his voice calm but filled with meaning. "We will stand with you, not as subjugated allies, but as partners. Let this be the beginning of something new, something that transcends what either of us could achieve alone." A wave of relief washed over Elena. The tension that had filled the room seemed to dissolve, replaced by an unspoken understanding. The Aelari had feared that humanity would try to dominate them, to change them. But now, they had seen the truth in the humans' words. This alliance was not about control. It was about respect. Elena could see the shift in the room. The Aelari delegates were no longer looking at the humans with suspicion, but with cautious optimism. There were still challenges ahead, but for the first time, the path forward seemed clear. The Unity Feast continued, with both humans and Aelari sharing food and stories. Laughter began to fill the room, and the barriers that had once divided them seemed to grow smaller. For that moment, at least, they were no longer two separate species, but two cultures coming together in peace. As the evening wore on, Elena found herself standing next to Lyra and Callis. She had never imagined she would be in a place like this, standing on the brink of something as monumental as this alliance. But she knew that it was not just a victory for humanity, nor for the Aelari. It was a victory for both species, for the future they could now build together. "We have made a choice tonight," Lyra said, her eyes filled with gratitude. "A choice to trust, to unite. It is a choice that will change the course of our history." Elena smiled, feeling the weight of the promise they had all made. And it's a choice that will change the future of the universe. As the stars outside the station twinkled, Elena felt a quiet sense of hope. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges, but for the first time, she truly believed that humanity and the Aelari could walk it together, side by side.